Are you still thinking about buying one of these? If so, there's a few things you need to know. There's loads of rumours flying around the internet at the moment about an update to the M2 MacBook Air, which is weird because this is one of the least likely candidates for an update in 2023, I think. It's got the M2 chip. I can't think of anything else really apart from the M3 chip that Apple needs to do to this laptop. But because of these rumours, which are just annoying at times, you may be wondering whether or not it's worth buying one of these this year. I'll get to that later in this video, and yes, that's a way to keep you watching, obviously. But in the meantime, I think there's 5 things that people don't tell you about this laptop, which before you buy one, you need to know. Number 1, you get used to these smudges pretty quickly. I've mentioned this before, I know, a bit of a broken record as always, but as you can see, my M2 MacBook Air, which is the midnight version, is covered in scratches. Not scratch. Well, that's a good point. You don't know if it's scratched because it's covered in smudges. I should add at this point that I'm the sort of person who likes clean tech to a degree. There's a certain thing about having a piece of tech that's a little bit older and has a few nicks here and there and smudges and stuff, but that comes with age. Whereas with this laptop, these smudges arrive pretty much as soon as you get it out the box. To keep it clean, you'd have to carry around one of these, a microfiber cloth, but as you'll see, look, I'll show you, you can't get rid of them very easily. In fact, you'd need to carry around a microfiber cloth, and I've not got one near me, but one of those spray things that keeps things clean. No one's got time to do that. You can, of course, try and wet your finger, and do that, and then that doesn't work either, it just gets worse. As someone who has lived with this since July last year, I have one piece of advice. If you're going to get the midnight version of the M2 MacBook Air, which, let's be honest, is the most interesting and the coolest looking out of a fairly boring bunch of colours, then you have to get used to this. You have to own the smudges, or just get a different colour. Number 2 is that the chassis on this M2 MacBook Air can get a bit clicky. Now, this is something that has manifested fairly recently, and I don't know if you'll hear this or not. Basically, over the last 2 or 3 weeks, whenever I pick this up or open the lid like that, it clicks. It's not a creak, it's not a snap, it's just this kind of stiff metallic joint, you know, one of those things where, I don't know, it's very hard to describe, but it makes a noise now, which it didn't used to do. Now, I should note at this juncture that my 9-month-old son grabbed the top of the display. It was on, basically, I did that terrible thing as a parent does occasionally. I left this unattended. My son came over and just immediately grabbed the top of the display and attempted to eat it, because he does that with everything at the moment. Now, I think it started making this clicking noise since then, but I can't be sure. And I can't blame him. He's 9 months old. Kids do that sort of stuff. I've said this before in the past, that Apple's quality control sometimes isn't great. Whenever I buy something, I tend to find a little annoyance or a little something wrong with it that shouldn't be there. Don't take my word for this, and anything you do to your MacBook as a result of this is not my fault. I just need to add that disclaimer. But if you take off the bottom plate and then put it back on, that can remove the clicks sometimes. I haven't tried that with this yet, but I think it's related to the hinge, which definitely isn't a DIY operation. So yeah, that's a bit annoying. While I've got you, just a very quick word from today's sponsor, which is the fantastic SaneBox. And SaneBox is an email tool that I've been using over the last few weeks to save hours of time managing my email each week. But I want to focus very quickly on one of their best features, which is the deep clean. And the best thing about this feature is that you can sign up for it for free. You can use it without any strings attached. Just sign up for a free trial of SaneBox on their website, link in description. You don't have to put your credit card details in. You're not tied into anything. You can give it a go completely free of charge. And the idea is that the deep clean feature stops you reaching for that select all and delete all option in your email client. We've all done that, and when you do that, you tend to accidentally delete things that you shouldn't have deleted. Instead, with Deep Clean, you can look at all of your emails in your inbox, grouped by sender, and then get rid of the ones that don't matter straight away. Why is this important? Because email clutter is a massive drain on our productivity. It raises your stress levels. It's just a horrible thing. And equally, if you've got loads of emails sitting there, you're probably paying for storage space that you don't need. Having used this Deep Clean feature on my email inbox for quite a while now, I can confirm that it makes a massive difference. There's loads more to SaneBox as you'd imagine, so to find out more, click that link in the description. I admitted recently that I was a bit too hasty with my praise of the base model M2 MacBook Air last year. Certainly I defended it a bit too much. Back then, when it first came out, there were loads of very intense testing videos undertaken where people who have got much more experience with that sort of stuff than me found out that basically under load, the new base model M2 MacBook Air was technically slower than the M1 version. And this is all to do with the way that the SSD storage is configured in these new machines. I won't get into the details of it because it's very boring, but basically they are a bit slower. And this exact laptop has let me down in that way. That's why I had to kind of go back and think, hang on a minute, was I being a little bit too fanboyish about this? And I think I was, because I was in London last year, I think last October, and I had to do some last minute video editing, which I've done before with the M1 MacBook Air, and that machine had no problem. That was the base model version of that one as well, and it would do 4K video editing from this camera, no trouble whatsoever. In London last year, when I tried the exact same thing with this laptop, it completely failed. It stuttered, it stalled, and basically I had to give up. Despite that, I have been using this base model M2 MacBook Air as my main workhorse for this business since July last year. So providing I don't ask too much of it, which I know still isn't good enough, I get that, but I don't need to. I don't really need to do video editing on this laptop. And bearing that in mind, it doesn't put a foot wrong. And that's because single core performance is fantastic. It is buttery smooth throughout macOS. There's no trouble there whatsoever. And also the battery life remains just absolutely incredible. So providing you're not going to do anything particularly fruity with these base model M2 MacBook Airs, you'll get away with that spec like I do. If you only have the budget for the base model M2 MacBook Air and you're not planning on editing 4K or 8K video with it, you're going to be absolutely fine. Just like the new MacBook Pros, the MacBook Air has a notch right at the top of the screen. That is where the camera gubbins is basically, and it doesn't matter. I've always thought that the 13-inch laptop display is pretty much the ideal size for most people. You can get two apps side by side, no trouble whatsoever, and when you place this thing on a table or one of those seat tables that you get on, normal class train carriages that I travel on, there's no trouble. However, when I heard about the rumoured 15-inch version of this MacBook Air, all of that went out the window. I now desperately want a bigger MacBook Air, damn you Tim, and I have no idea why. No, actually that's not fair. I do know why. You see, there are certain times when I do feel like a bit more screen real estate would be nice. I get that on my 16-inch MacBook Pro, but that is the size of a planet and I just can't be bothered to carry it around everywhere. So when I'm using things like spreadsheets, which yes, I do use occasionally, and what else? I suppose also when I'm doing things like I'm building the description for these YouTube videos where I have a note on one side and then the video on the right-hand side, it's a bit small. It's a little bit restrictive on this 13-inch screen. So the idea of having a bigger version of this laptop is very exciting. And I think if Apple manages to keep this very sort of lithe and light on its feet chassis and the weight remains under control, I think it could become a very popular laptop for them. And this rumour does feel incredibly left field. It came out of nowhere basically, but if Apple really is building a 15-inch version of the MacBook Air, they're doing so because there's a need for one. But this is the fifth thing to know about the M2 MacBook Air. If you're looking to buy one this year and you like the idea of a bigger version, then it might be worth holding on. So, should you buy an M2 MacBook Air now based on the fact that there are rumours about an update on the way? Well, I think it's quite simple. If you can wait, wait. Equally, if the 13-inch size isn't big enough for you, wait. We must remember that these are rumours. We've got no idea if the M3 version of the MacBook Air is going to arrive this year, and we've certainly got no idea if that 15-inch version is even a thing. But if you want one now, just get yourself the M2 version. If you buy one of these, you will not be disappointed, I promise. But if you need a bit more input from me in terms of what this thing's all about, keep watching for a link to my full review.